I'd like to bring this workshop to order, please. July 18th, 2016. We'll wave the flag today. First item, Twyla.
Is the charter changes? Charter changes?
You want to start?
Sure.
Let
Diane?
me ask you some questions.
Sure.
Just to get, I'm jumping way ahead on this. But if we wanted
I did take that.
to have a vote for the town budget, people to go in like they do on the school budget, if we wanted to do that, does that, I was told by our last attorney that that would require almost a complete charter rewrite.
Right. And I actually prepared a little handout that I'll distribute. This comes down to the issue of what is a charter revision versus a charter amendment.
Right.
So what Maine law provides is that a charter revision, which is a fundamental change in the form or scheme of town government, requires a charter commission, whereas a charter amendment, which is a change in or correction of detail relating to the town government, that's a charter amendment and doesn't require a charter commission.
Okay, now what I would like to.
So in response, that's just a preface to the answering your
Right.
question. What you're talking about would be changing the body that has the ultimate authority to approve the budget from the council to the town meeting. And I believe that would be a fundamental change in the town government, because you're taking a legislative role that the council has by charter and reassigning it to the town meeting. So if that's a proposal, my recommendation would be that you not submit that proposal as a charter amendment to a simple vote, and instead you would initiate a full charter commission.
Right.
And once the charter commission is initiated, there's no specific limitation around their authority. So they can come up with a new charter, they can come up with amendments to the charter, and they issue a report, and then those revisions that are recommended or proposed in the report then go to referendum once they're done with the
Okay.
process.
Now, if let's say we wanted a charter, let's say we decided to have a charter rewrite, and we would have to get another charter commission.
Correct.
Now, does that charter commission, do we have to go to the people to have a vote to say that the charter, we're gonna start a new charter revision, we're gonna select a charter commission?
No, you as the town council could,
Appoint a charter commission.
right, well, you would make the decision that there will be a charter commission.
Right.
You would appoint 3 members of the commission, and then the remaining members would be elected. And you could determine, there's a few different methods for electing. You could do it the same way that you're elected by wards and at-large. You could do all at-large, or you could do all wards. But in any event, 3 members would be appointed by you, and the remainder would be elected.
Now, let's say we did that, and after we spent all the money on a new charter, then we'd have to go back to the people to approve that charter.
Correct. Yeah. Then that would have to go to vote once that whole process is done.
Now, so basically that's what I had. Now, you had,
Yeah, I put it in here, and I think that Diane might have sent it over to you to talk to you about it. I know that we had a very preliminary discussion with it, and I was very generalized. So when I read that initially, that's what drove me to run. So ultimately, the petition committee, when they submit a petition, in this case, the petition, I'm using the example citing from 2015, it's the most fresh one to remember. That petition was deemed insufficient, not because the petition itself didn't have meet the criteria, but because of the way that the language was in the charter. It states that the budget must be legally adopted. So that would mean that it would go to referendum vote, in this case, it would have been June, and it would have had to have been adopted for then the mechanism in place to allow petitioners committee to go forward, get the petition. But then, that's a state mandate, of the election would be a state, would be governed by state laws. If I'm not right there, let me know. So how would a charter from a town level be able to circumvent?
Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's where I think the problem lies. And so by changing the legally adopted language to adopted by council, it allows the mechanism in the charter to take place, because the council adopts, in this case, that school budget, and then a petitioners committee wants to get together before it gets to the referendum vote. It allows for that to come in place, the people to come together and say, we want to go ahead and have another look at this. And they would submit a petition, and if it was found sufficient, then it would go to council. Council would set the date, everybody would get together in that special town meeting to decide whether or not they wanted to leave it standing as the town council adopted it, or if there was a vote by the 250, I think, registered voters, or better, had to be there, and vote either up or down to accept or amend, and then it would go off to the actual referendum. So
Yeah.
it's just a simple change in the language that allows the spirit and of the original charter intention was to allow any persons in the town to say, after the council adopts a budget, if the citizens choose to want to go ahead and revisit
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's something that was not in place, because that was tried and obviously didn't work. with
Right, right.
the Language.
Yeah, so here's the, and as I recall, the petition from 2015 dealt specifically with the school budget.
Right.
And here's the complicating factor with the school budget and the reason that there was a problem with that petition. The statute has a very specific procedure for approving a school budget. So it has to be, the school budget has to be approved by the legislative body, which could either be, in your case, it's the council under the current charter, or it could be a town meeting. And then, once it's approved by the legislative body, the voters then have an opportunity to vote yea or nay on the budget that was approved by the legislative body. So the complicating factor with your charter is that as it's currently constructed, the council is the legislative body and has the authority to approve it, and then it goes to the voters and they get to vote on it in a referendum. I think what the petition was looking was to, well, it wasn't entirely clear from the petition, but the problem with the petition is it would have initiated a special town meeting on the council adopted budget. And then it left open the question of, well, what about the validation referendum that's required by state law? And there are very specific time frames for when that validation referendum has to take place. And in order for there to be a final adopted school budget, it has to go to referendum. So I don't think that there was there would be enough time to have a council-approved school budget that then goes to town meeting for reconsideration, and then for the validation referendum to take place within the 30 days.
After the adoption.
Right, after the adoption of the budget. So I think your question, though, gives me more insight into the language that you included in the packet.
Sure.
So as I understand it, your thought it would be that there would be, rather than it being legally adopted, you're proposing to change the language legally adopted, which means that it would need to be go for the validation referendum, and instead have it be the council approval could then trigger the.
And I guess, in reading it over and over again, and I'm far from anything close to a legal expert, but in reading it over and over again, over the last year and some change, that's the only thing that I could see as I think the mechanism or the spirit of it is it's intended to do just that. allow the voters an opportunity if there's something after the council adopts the budget, whether it's not just school side, the municipality side as well, whatever the case may be, whatever budget article or item that somebody in this town felt like, hey, I think maybe we need to talk about this, and maybe there's more folks here that didn't, for whatever reason, chime in the allotted time and what they want to now. And so to be able to do that, I think that's something that we're seeing. It just that example is the only one I can use because it's closest, but you see it now as a real deficiency, because if something came along that required that sort of scrutiny or at least opportunity to talk about it, as it sits right now, the charter, there's no recourse. There's absolutely no recourse for anyone in this town to make a move, and so I
believe when
guess
the
we
charter
should fix
was
that.
wrote, or whatever,
Yeah.
that nothing had ever happened like this before. And
True.
I got the numbers changed on the charter from 15 to 10% for this, but I always just thought it was for the municipality vote.
Right.
That was the only, and knowing that the state went to referendum, we had to go to referendum.
Sure.
The school was not, and hopefully, to tell you the truth, hopefully this never happens again, but, you know.
Hopefully, but
I agree. I
with
think
having this, I think it would have saved us in the end by not having to go through so many referendums had the special town meeting been able to occur. Because then people could have voiced their opinions, done what they needed to do.
It would be good, I'm not saying probably would be all right, but, as going to town meetings, it would be hard to get 250 people. If you didn't have 250 registered people in there, you're done.
But it gives them the opportunity
Right,
to at
that's-
least
yeah,
try.
There's a lot of opportunities.
I think you're absolutely right in saying there are very few things that'll get 250 people out. Normally, when we're in our Old Town meeting, the only time that the gym ever filled up was on school budget, municipality budget. Everything else kind of just went by the
Right.
wayside. You'd be lucky to get 100 people, and you get 5 the same people talking every time. So I get where you're coming from there, but I want to kind of circle back. So what I'm hearing with the challenge then is that state has very clear guidelines as to once adopted, the referendum has to happen within 30 days.
Right.
So what?
So yeah, so that's what I'm trying to play out in my mind how it would work. So the only, unless there's a petition for a special town meeting, the council adopted budget would be the one that would go to the
Rolls in.
validation referendum, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So that's what I was
So,
thinking too. And
yeah.
using what you were saying, so let's just say council adopts a budget, and I'll just assume a couple of things here, and you can tell me if that's wrong to do so. Assume that, okay, people know going into this meeting that the council's probably going to adopt this budget. Safe bet to say 5 people are already ready to roll with the committee piece and start to move in. So council votes on it on a Tuesday and says, we're going to move forward with this particular budget. The petitioners committee comes in the next day, talks to Twyla, and gets things moving. According to the timeline in the charter, and forgive me if I'm not accurate 100%, I think there's enough time in there, although it would have to be pretty speedy and not a lot of bumps, but I think it's doable to have that mechanism in place and still get everything done before the required 30 days. I know you said you had some reservations about that, but would you think it's 100% inconceivable that couldn't happen in that time frame?
We'd have posting requirements too.
That's the other side. That's
I mean,
why I'm
here's the
asking.
challenge. So you currently have a 15-day period for filing the petition. So, and then there's some period of time to verify that the clerk needs to verify the petition.
Something, yeah.
And then the warrant for the meeting needs to be posted. And I think it's okay for that meeting to be posted 7 days for the meeting. So really you have, well, here's the problem. Within that 30-day period, you would have to receive the signatures, which right now is a 15-day period, hold the meeting, which would be another 7 days,
Right.
and then within, I guess at that point, I guess if there's a following that meeting, if the budget is a different budget is approved, then that arguably would
Be
then,
adopted.
then
Could
start
conflict.
then it would start the 30-day period running. So
Right.
it would no longer be the council adoption of the budget that
It would
starts
be
the
the
30 days.
town.
It would be the town's adoption of the budget.
Right.
And that's what we were figuring last year in 2015 when we did that. As it stood, with the legally adopted, like you said, you can either have the town or you can have the council.
Yeah.
So reading into all the statutes and reading into the charter, that was how we foresaw it
Yeah.
happening, which would allow that 30-day window
Mm-hmm.
from the time that the town adopts it with a special town meeting. You extend it another 30 days.
Now, what would happen, like this year, we adopted basically the school budget as it was. Well, let's say the school budget was $800,000 more than the previous year.
Right.
And the town council stepped in with our authority and said, no, that's too expensive.
Right, right.
But then the same people could go in and say, oh no, we want that 800,000.
No,
But
it cuts both ways. I absolutely understand where you're going with this, and I'm thinking, I hear that loud and clear. I'll go back the other way on this. Instead of trying to push this into a very narrow window, what's the alternative of moving the date out enough to allow that? So we can make the amendment change, but is there a way to move the date for a council adoption of the budget and still meet guidelines that the state puts in place? If we moved it back 30 days, would it,
No.
earlier 30 days,
You'd
is that
still,
an option?
you'd still have that 30-day
'Cause
window.
it's always gonna, so we're always gonna be up against it, because no matter
Right.
where we kick
Right.
it, it's gonna, okay, that's what I thought,
Right.
that's what I understood.
So whether the council votes on it or the town approves it, you have 30 days to send it to
The
referendum.
clock starts immediately after the adoption.
But to your comment about that, whether or not the town wants another 800,000 or they want to decrease it, 800,000, it puts it on the taxpayers and the voters that make that decision. They're the ones who are going to foot the bill anyways.
We've also noted that the town don't really come out and vote. So it's,
I can appreciate that, but I think that they've
They're
kind
gonna
of,
have to
they've kind of,
start, like,
well, I think, if nothing else, the events of the last, 18 months, almost 2 years now here, have got people a lot more, at least, eyes open and facing forward when it comes to stuff. So that's good. But hopefully it doesn't have to take something like, the stuff we went through last year to get people involved and at least paying attention.
It would have been easier if we didn't
Huh?
confirm for the next 3 years to continue with the referendum process.
I was just gonna say that,
If
if we
we,
didn't
if
have
we,
that in place.
if we didn't
Right.
have that in place, that
Right.
mechanism would have
It
made
would-
this a lot easier
It would.
discussion.
Right,
And
right.
now we've
Yeah.
gotta do it for the next 3
Yeah.
years.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's
So,
the only way.
Because that would have bought us more time, because you're not locked into doing that in that June timeframe.
That's right.
You could have a much more laid back conversation about what the real issues are, rather than forced into a deadline and working backwards to make the deadline.
that's exactly right. It's the toughest part of it right
You
there.
wouldn't have that 30 days would go away no
Yeah,
matter what.
and this isn't, the only thing I look at this as is an opportunity to correct what appears to be something that, when tried to be used, whether it was right, wrong, it's not about picking a side, it's about saying that as a citizen of this town, if there's an opportunity for something that you feel, there's a majority of folks that are saying, we want this, but, and we've expressed that, but we're not getting a response that's meeting with, or at least an understanding of, and saying, I can appreciate and see where you're coming from here. It's just being able to have open discourse, and when that breaks down, there is no open discourse anymore, then you have another option that's available. And then it falls upon that petitioners committee then to if you have the support that you say you do, show it. And it's really easy to do. You gotta get 250 people or more in a gym if you want to, but to get it to that
Oh,
point, you gotta get
yeah,
the signatures, and
yeah.
so there's a lot of hoops that must be jumped through, and to go through all those hoops and then come back to find out that really it doesn't matter, because the language states pretty clearly in the charter that you have to overturn an election in the state level, and charter law, or not law, but charter language isn't gonna turn over state law anytime in the near future. So I just, I know in talking with a lot of folks, that's the reason that, one of the reasons that people want to see that change, and they want to see.
by a lot of folks.
Okay, so let me be clear
Well,
on that.
in-
The folks that I talked to during my my time getting ready to come and run, that was one of the biggest concerns, that we need a mechanism. It wasn't just necessarily about school, that just happened to be the
The
polarizing
reason I
piece.
asked is I've heard no talks of it at all.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say school budget came and they went and did the whole thing. Is this a one-item thing? I mean, if they went out and got the petition, you know, the signatures, do it, could they add anything else to that? I mean, could it be something to do with municipal, or does it have to be just the school? Because what I'm looking at is a minority that would like to
Yeah.
get the police department.
Yeah.
So let's-
I mean, under your current charter, there's an ability to call a town meeting by petition to reconsider budget
Right.
articles.
but
And that
now-
would certainly include the municipal side as
Right.
well.
But could they combine the two? Because if, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to prevent, I mean, if somebody's doing a petition,
They
they can include those budget articles that
could
that
really
they
cripple
want,
the town.
that they want
could really
to be
cripple this
considered.
Because that same group of people is probably not in favor of the police department, public works, and
No, they could really.
I don't know what
There are
their
people in here that-
dispositions are on anything other than what,
Right, well,
on
you're
one particular
going for the
issue,
school
but.
department, and I understand that. But there are people here that would cripple the police department.
No, I agree, I understand what you're saying there too. All I'm trying to do is take.
Did I hear that? Did he say triple?
Cripple.
Cripple. I was with you on that one. I heard triple.
Yeah.
I haven't heard
I
that
knew
one
it-
at
I
all,
knew-
Roger.
I knew it wasn't triple. I knew it wasn't
Whoa,
triple.
so-
Yeah.
just don't want- I don't
no,
wanna
I
cripple
agree
it.
with you. That's why I was
I don't
saying.
wanna cripple it, and there
So
are,
in that case, though, you'd have to have a majority vote. That would, just like you do with the school referendum, it would have to be a majority vote in order to do that.
There's
if
an,
it's done in June, you're not getting the
well,
majority.
there's an inherent amount of trust, whether I'm naive to this or not, but there's an inherent amount of trust that people place in the elected officials that come to this. So the likelihood of ever having to run down this road again, is, I'd like to think, is probably slim and none.
I think not.
So, but in-
basically what it would do is, it's gonna, to keep our town the way it's, let's say the police department halfway the way it is right now, the council wouldn't dare to do anything different.
I think for me, the key is, so slim and none, we operate under that, likelihood of it is slim and none, but the fact of the matter is that when it happened, it exposed what is a clear deficiency in the charter. So all I'm saying is that we correct that, we look at that, there's nothing that says we have to.
Created by the referendum.
Exactly.
Created by the referendum, because I
Yeah.
think the charter
Yeah.
stood by itself. It's the state
It's the state's
referendum
Right.
that complicated that
School
process.
If that gets pulled out of it, then,
Yeah.
exactly, it solves, it makes it a lot easier to solve this problem.
And
So-
that's a key point, because I don't think anybody here disagrees on the charter by itself. It was the referendum in the 30 days that complicated that process.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the purpose of the validation referendum was to ensure that the voters would have a say over the school
Right.
budget. And from the perspective of the opponents of the school budget, the state mandated process worked, at least initially, because it got voted, I forget how many times it got voted down. Did it voted down twice, or?
There's five.
5.
Oh, 5 times? Okay. Wow, my
Five-
memory
five-
is.
We went
five to
to
pass.
five,
Five
right.
to pass.
Magic number 5 to get it
Okay.
through.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah.
So maybe a
Yeah.
different way to go about this then is not to look at, while we're under this for the next 3 years, I should say, required to vote in a referendum, is to not look at that gap in between the 30 there, but look at the language regarding what it reverts back to. 'Cause if my memory serves me correctly on this, when it was turned down, the initial thought process was that it would revert back to the previous year's budget. But there was also some language in there that stated after a certain point, it reverts to whatever the council adopted. Well, I say reverts back to the previous budget adopted by
By the
council.
council.
So maybe a better place to start, because we're in the boat that we're in with the referendum, would be to look back at that language and say, rather than have it being the budget that was adopted by the council, it would be the reverting back to the previous year's budget.
That's state statute too, isn't it?
Yeah, see, that's the problem with that, because the Title 20A mandates what happens when there's not an approved budget
Okay.
by July 1st. And basically, it says that it's the last budget that was approved by the legislative body and
Yeah.
submitted
Okay.
to referendum. And, you know, until there's a finally approved budget, so you still have to keep going through the process, but that's.
Even if that
So
supersedes the vote from the previous legally adopted?
Yeah.
Cause it's
Yeah.
not
So
legally
even if-
adopted
right.
if
Well,
it's turned down.
That's it, and I see that, I see the rub there.
So then-
That it could, a budget that could be approved by the council, but in essence, voted down by the voters, becomes the language, becomes the budget until.
Right, right, which is kind of crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my
It's like
How do we
you're-
fix
you're right,
that?
It's
How do we
mandating.
fix that?
Yeah, I mean, that's in the hands of Augusta, because unfortunately, I mean, that's one of the problems, is because the legislature specifically has mandated this budget approval process, we need to work within the framework of that, and anything we do can't run afoul of that.
So what recourse can we give the citizens then if we're gonna run into this 30-day window thing because of the referendum and state statute, and then we're running into issues with the adopted with the state statute? What can we give the citizens for recourse if they don't like the budget that's, I don't wanna see another 5 times going out to vote. And I think that the citizens should have some type of recourse to be able to come up and say, other than the public hearing, because still it lands in the 7 of us. We can say, well, we're not gonna listen to you and we're gonna do what we think is best anyways, like had happened before. I mean, there was many people that showed up. We got in less than 48 hours over 719 signatures. You know, that should show enough that there was enough people, and then even Twyla had said that June referendum vote was the largest turnout that had happened in Lisbon history. So that shows that there was enough for June. Right.
For June.
I'm saying for a June
I was on
referendum,
you,
though.
I was on you, Eric.
You look at what last year's did, and then you look at the difference of this year's. There was enough people that looked at this year's budget as, okay, we're all working together. People were being heard, but last year people were pretty ticked off. So they came out by the,
Both
the
sides.
carloads.
Both sides.
Council to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Exactly,
Right, but
and I
that's what
think
I'm saying
you hit the
is-
nail on the head there, but in the event that that doesn't
Yeah.
get done,
Basically, last year, I believe, even one of your previous school board members said the same thing. It's, whatever the people vote. He did not realize, and a lot of us didn't realize, on actually what the council was capable of doing, because we were always under the, we're not an RSU.
right,
We are a standalone community.
right.
And I was always brought to the point where we have to abide by the RSU laws, and we don't.
Yeah, we're our own dance partner.
Where we have our own set, but we also, as a conservative council last year, found out that it really didn't work. So we found out it's a lot easier to work with them than to buck them.
Well, to that point too, Roger, one of the things that having the dialogue with Tracy through the course of this is, she pointed out that our 2 potential dance partners through the RSU would have been more expensive to this community.
Right.
So that's something I just want
Yeah, well,
people to
I
understand.
already knew that.
But we knew it sitting here. It was something I learned coming through this process. It is not the average person in the community that knew that.
I
There
knew
was
that
the
because
school
I had
committee
nieces
spending
on
left and foot. It was
I had
more
nieces
expensive.
on the,
Yeah.
Mount Ararat, and they were the ones that told me 3 years ago before it, that it was gonna be too costly.
Too costly for us to join with anybody else is the way that we ended up here.
End of the day, this is not about trying to indict anything that anything or any one particular person from last year. I think all last year was a wake-up call to say that this is
needs
the
to be a
problem we ran
mechanism.
into. How do we fix this? That's it.
And I think my response to your question is, I think, one way to do that would be to make the town meeting the final arbiter of the school budget, and that would require a charter commission.
Okay.
But I think it's difficult to do what you're, to have sort of a new mechanism for overturning the council-approved budget, other than the validation referendum that's dictated by state law, because of the narrow timeframes that are in state law just the mechanics of getting all those signatures. I mean, I suppose you could shorten the time period to submit the
That
signatures.
was my next.
Yeah.
Well, we did it
What
in
is
2
the,
days.
I mean, it's going to be a tight, because
Still tight.
we haven't even taken into account that at some,
Oh, yeah,
but there's some time period between
Where it's gonna
when
be
the council approves
working
it,
days,
when
calendar
Twyla
days.
has to come up with the blanks
Right.
to get them, which, she's, right. So it's just there's a lot of, that's very difficult to do within 30 days. But I mean, potentially you could try to come up with a mechanism that would allow it. but it's going to be,
It's gonna be commission rather than amendment?
No, wait a minute, I did not hear that.
no, within the 30 days.
If you work
Yeah.
within the 30 days,
Yeah,
you
within
could
the 30
actually-
days. it'd
It's
be-
not a
right.
fundamental change. It's
Okay.
working
Right.
within the
Right,
constraints.
right, right, yeah, no, I think if you're playing around with time limits for submitting a
Yes.
petition for
That's
a
not a
new
fundamental
town meeting,
change.
I think that's an amendment.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, that's something to explore then, and see if that's, with your interpretation of, I guess the petition, it's designed, like you said, for either school, municipal, whatever it is, budget-related item. And so, as long as we're bound by this referendum piece, then that's something that we're always gonna be butting up against. If that was removed, then this is not
I mean,
as
it's
big.
going to have that be removed. It has to be voted down.
Yep, no,
3 years from now.
right. So just wait
Right,
for
That
this.
is,
right,
that's
right,
the
yeah, it
only,
can only
that's
come
the
up every 3
mechanism,
years.
that's the mechanism that undoes it.
Okay,
Yeah.
If that were out in 3 years.
so,
Right.
just so I'm clear, it's a matter of
Yeah.
just going back and
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
at the
it's
timeframe.
time-
then.
Yeah, I
time-
mean, I think
timing
that's,
is
I think
the
we
issue.
But I would-
you'd have to look at all the different timeframes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
Right,
I remembered looking at it, but I don't remember what the results of that
What
one
would
piece of
this-
our last
Yeah.
vote was.
What would do if we need to remove the referendum? The people in this town need to remove the referendum.
Right.
What if we work, then we could really do something. What if we worked hard in the next
3 years to
years to get the people to remove that referendum?
that's exactly, I think
You
you're,
know.
But I
Edu-
think
it's
you're
an
gonna
educated
have,
piece, right.
you're
Or
gonna
you
have
submit,
a hard
yeah.
time doing that because there isn't a lot of trust with that. Because then they're gonna look at it that the 7 have control. And
but
can,
We're missing,
But the point that he's making is that the 5 of those that are in the trust is sitting here. So
Well,
we have a responsibility in
I
that. So
I
get his
understand that,
point.
but it's building that trust back up,
Agreed.
because right now there is no trust.
if we remove the referendum though, I
Why are you
think,
saying there's no trust? Everything went through the last school budget.
There's,
Right.
I
there's
think,
still a lot
I
of,
thought it went through quite well last year. the
And then
last
what,
school
it was, cause that boiled down to the fact is,
On John
conversation between you and Tracy, the fact is,
Yeah.
it needed to have that dialogue associated. The information was coming from the 2 chairs to drive this forward. And that was clear through this process. I mean, you said it firsthand. The fact is, you wanted one budget, one time, and we needed to make this decision in the December timeframe. We didn't have that dialogue. We were dead in the water. I mean,
but that's what it is. I haven't had, because I'm not as intimate with the school system as you people are, but I haven't had the non-trust. It's, you did a good job,
right.
you know, so the thing is, you gotta build trust. And in 1 year, and I was I was co-chair of the council. In 1 year, we certainly did not build the trust,
Well,
you
no.
know, so it's.
bad news travels fast.
Right, so, you know, you've gotta do it the other way, but I would recommend, not just for your school budget, but for the whole town, that we try to get rid of the referendum first and work hard at that.
I was just gonna say that, kinda going to Cassie, what she was asking about, how do you rebuild that? I think removing the referendum allows the mechanism that we're talking about right now here to be in place so that people can move forward, because you're not up against the clock anymore. So I think that, it's not about so much trust anymore as an understanding that if there was ever a breakdown,
You would
similar
have
to
your
this,
town meeting.
you would have the ability to
Right.
pull the mechanism and lever and say, hey, let's throw the brakes on this thing and figure this out real quick.
It's gotta be, people have gotta be able to understand that they have a recourse, because if we say, let's get rid of the referendum, they're gonna be like, yeah, no, that's
So
not gonna
You
happen.
can always explain that's why we're doing this, so we
Right.
can slow the process down, so you can have your town meeting and
Educate
do it.
everybody.
And educate everybody, because, you know, as you know as well as I do, there are some people on your side that do not understand anything about a school budget. It's just, I want this amount of money, that's what they said, that's what we're gonna get. And, same with municipality. If it's, we can work real hard on a budget to try to come up with the best one we can, and there are people out there, oh, you don't need this, you don't need that. Well,
Yeah,
we've
it's-
listened to that for a long time, and look at where it got us.
That's very true, Roger. One of the things I look at is the fact is there's 20% in one direction, 20% in another. It's the only 60% in the middle that where
Yeah.
the common ground is found.
There's no sense to run one way or another, too far right, too far left. It's
Right.
just trying to find something that works. I'm gonna go back to you for a legal opinion on this. So, just so I think what we're talking about makes sense here, if 2 years down, or 3 years down the line now, that referendum, we decide to not have referendum anymore when it comes to this stuff, and the language proposal talked about here was changed, wouldn't you, it would still, or could it even not even make a change? Could the language as it stands right then, we're not up against anything, we wouldn't have to make any amendment change, because there would be, the current language would be sufficient to allow a mechanism to go in place, because we're not up against any sort of state referendum mandate. Does that make sense? I know I kinda went the
Yeah.
long way around the barn to get there, but.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking through is there is a statutory provision relating to amendment of a school budget in Title 20A. And so what I'm wrestling with is whether the type of process that we're talking about would run afoul of that again, it's
Yeah.
sort of the extent to which
We're still
state law
bound, yeah.
preempts it.
Yeah.
So I'll need to look at that
Okay.
statutory provision and in this context. And I mean, it seems to me that I think it probably would be, just my initial reaction is I think that's probably an option, because if you eliminated the referendum and you left the current charter in place where the council is the legislative body, the initial legislative body for approving the school budget, but there's an opportunity to petition
The people.
to have the town meeting step in as the legislative body. I think that would fall within this, within what would be permissible by statute. So I think that's, and it probably would make sense in that event if you were proposing to eliminate the referendum, to try to couple those on the same ballot, so people are voting on the issue of eliminating the referendum at the same time they're voting on
Something else to
any,
take its place.
right, I mean, I guess the question is there any change that's necessary? I mean,
Right.
I think that perhaps that legally adopted language should be changed.
Yep.
Because that suggests it's sort of the final, because that suggests
Right.
it's the final validation, which was one of the problems that the petition had. Because when it says legally adopted, the school budget is only legally adopted when there's a validation referendum vote in favor of the budget. So I
So-
think that would be a change that would be necessary in order to,
Excellent.
in order to do
And it
that.
doesn't matter where we would make that change then. We could make that change now as far as an amendment, and that could be the show of good faith.
To move us forward.
To say, hey, listen, come referendum time, we've already done one piece to the change to restore this. The other piece is then removing the referendum
Yeah.
in 3 years.
I'd do that.
And by doing that, it's a step in the right direction, I think. I mean, obviously want to hear what you guys have to think about that, but just listening to what you're saying here, as long as we don't run afoul of the state piece, and if you think we're close, then maybe getting that legal piece out of there and putting it as council adopted, that's the show of good faith that some of the folks that Cassie mentioned might still be kind of out on the outside there.
Yeah.
And then the idea is then we have a way to kind of rally the troops come 3 years down the line to say, hey, listen, if you want what you talked about, then here's how we go about doing it.
Mr. Kaler has a question for clarification.
I just had a clarifying question.
As soon as we get done with this part of the charter, I'll let you talk.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just to respond to, Norm, what you just said, I think until the referendum provision was removed, we'd still be in
Bumping into the window.
well, we'd still be in a
Yeah.
dilemma if we got a petition, because then it would be, can we do this within the
Well,
parameters
that
of
was my
state law?
thought process
Maybe,
too.
So-
maybe
so, yeah,
hold that in
so-
our back
so
pocket
there's-
and do it the
yeah.
year of, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
Versus, I'm
right,
not saying it's
right.
gonna happen now.
Yeah.
But, because I could understand that could cause a whole host of
Yeah.
issues that we don't want, headaches that we don't want any
Yeah.
part of.
Yeah.
What do those key time periods have to be? You mentioned it's 15 days for getting the signatures and
Yeah,
then
the charter
validation.
provides for 15 days. There needs to be some time period
For validation.
for issuing the petition blanks. And I can't remember whether there's a provision in the charter that specific provision in the charter about, as to when, how quickly you need to turn that around. I'm not sure there is.
I
Yeah.
But
think
then
there,
the council needs to adopt it once the verification or the approval comes back.
'Cause-
Like by certified, the council has to ratify that certification or something,
Right, right. So, yeah,
and you have another meeting.
right. There needs to be a meeting there once the petition, once the signatures are validated, then the
Council has
council
to-
needs to accept those.
Right.
So currently, that's a 15-day, that all needs to take place within 15 days after receipt of the
Pushes
petition.
it to 3 meetings,
Yeah.
which is what your snag
Yeah.
is.
That's
Right.
30 days, and then 15 is 45, something like that.
Well, the reason I ask that is the fact is, okay, we're considering changing that language. Is it unreasonable to actually shrink the time period in that time period to be able to address that, knowing if we're successful in removing the referendum piece 3 years out, that we can relax those periods of time, be able to accommodate that in the longer term.
Right, right. Yeah, I need to sort of run a timeline
Okay.
of what all the,
That's
I
fair.
can provide that,
That's fair.
provide that to you.
And
And
what I'd
then
actually,
what all and figure out, is it all doable within 30 days? Yeah.
okay.
yeah, and that's not based on what we have now.
Right, right,
What would we
right.
have-
But could
what
we
would-
adjust it to make it doable?
What would we have to
Yeah.
shrink it to
Yeah.
make it reasonable?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
where I would actually like to see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay,
It was good stuff, yeah.
okay, yeah, it was good discussion.
Thank you, and thank you for having this conversation. My question, Roger, was related to your question, and I might have misunderstood it, so I'm not sure. When your question was around the mechanism as it exists now to call for special town meeting, whether it's on the municipal side or whether it's on the school side. School side is its own mess, has been well covered. I think you asked Dan, I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Attorney.
You can call me Mr. Stockford.
Mr. Stockton, I'll do that, Mr. Stockton. If, like, someone called for town meeting, the question, at least I thought I heard you ask was, could they go into other areas? And my
If-
understanding of at least the way it works now, if you call a special town meeting, which now I think you can only do it on the municipal side, it would have to be for the specific items mentioned in the petition.
Right, but there are people out there that would piggyback on the school side, that's what I'm saying.
But if it's
but
not
as I
listed
read-
in the petition, they
Right,
wouldn't
yeah.
be able
Well,
to change
they would
anything.
ask you to,
Sign for both
But
to
right.
front.
So basically, you're saying, put
Yeah,
a
when you're
whole
signing
list
one,
of
you get
pork
that.
in there.
Right.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, yeah, I gotcha. Not only gonna get a school budget, you can do fire truck and.
you know, it would be one thing if somebody went out and got one for the school, and then another group went out and got something for the town, that would be all right. But the school does a very good job collecting signatures. We've all saw that, I'll have to admit it. It's real easy for them to piggyback. And that's what I'm worried about, because it would probably benefit you, because I know if they gutted the police department, they'd wanna give the money, they give the police department to the school department.
I don't want the police department.
Well,
But isn't there a
I've
way-
heard that.
I've heard that from many.
Is there a
Take
way
from the
that we
police
would
and give to the school. I've
Yeah.
heard
be able
that.
to make it, like, if you're petitioning, like, they have to be separate petitions? Is there a way that we could do that, so that if somebody wanted to start a petition for because they're separate budgets?
It has to be a municipal or a school
Right.
budget.
Yeah.
An either or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can be-
Can we put some language in that?
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
or.
I mean, if they wanted,
I think it's right. I
if somebody
think
wants to
I
do
think
it, but they have to be,
maybe-
they're separate.
Right.
I mean, I
that
think
would
you
be
could
fine.
add some language saying that a petition shall not include both municipal
Yeah, I think that's prudent.
requests to reconsider
Look,
both.
and I
Because
couldn't
it
agree more,
allows,
I think it's a great
allows
idea.
somebody who's reading your petition who's getting you face value. Well,
Right.
what am I trying to say here?
You have,
Yeah.
to go to your example, you have a few minority groups all of a sudden band together and common goal of trying to push through one petition with all their laundry lists of
Right.
everything
Right.
we want under the sun.
Right.
And it circumvents the whole idea behind having a council and
Right.
sending people to begin with.
Right.
So, no, I think it's probably a great idea to have, if it's gonna be, it's gonna be this or that, it's either gonna be this side or that side.
But there's nothing,
Some group can still go and pull another petition.
Yeah, they
Start a
could.
separate
They
one.
could start a separate one, but it wouldn't be,
But it's
the school
required,
wouldn't be,
but it's required to be doing it
Of course they
through,
could.
right?
They could
Uh,
do
It,
I don't-
no, I hear what you're saying, Eric. You
I
can still
missed
get the same
group of
people
They
and
got-
saying,
I got one petition
yeah,
here, one here.
you
Could
won't mind,
sign
I
this
vote
one,
yours,
sign
yeah?
that?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and there's nothing saying that they
But-
can't do that, but you can't combine them all onto one
Right,
petition.
no, it's just two different papers, that's
But
all.
Right.
with all those signatures,
Instead of one, you sign here and sign here.
right, you can see, right, somebody standing out food city with two separate
A
petition
lot of times people
blanks
sign
could
and
have
don't
you
know.
fill out
I
right
talked to
there.
some people that signed the school one, had no idea what they were even signing.
And it can be the same, it could be the same people?
thing.
Because it
Yeah.
was asked.
That would probably, if it was two petition, so if it was, had to do with municipal, it would be a separate petition, you know, stating, okay, we want to get rid of, we want county mounties in here instead of,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
No, but it addresses the attention. It addresses the intention, I should say.
Right.
Are we focusing on a municipal issue or are we focusing on a school budget issue? It's
Right, and
at
that's-
least
that's
from a
what it
stewardship
should
of
be.
what we're doing is we're
it should be
right.
what we're focusing on.
And I think the meetings, I mean, if somebody, like, say you decided you wanted to take out a petition for the school and the town, I'm not opposed to you doing that, but I think people need to know what they're signing, and then there needs to be two separate meetings to distinguish the two, so that they're not being combined, and people are showing up thinking that they're voting for one thing, and it's, in turn, they're actually voting for something else.
And that kind of goes back to that point you had mentioned, Eric, where you have two separate ones, but you still get all the same people coming. There's still gonna be two separate public hearings for these people still have to come out, and so that means there's gonna be opportunity afforded, especially if it's two separate meetings. There's gonna be opportunity afforded for folks in the town to get the word out and say, hey, listen, got 3 or 4 groups, smaller groups coming together to try to push some stuff through. I think it's important we go to these public hearings and make sure that everybody understands that it's not just one side that needs to get heard. So that's the idea, some mechanisms in place.
So, before we move on to the next item, it's safe to say that we're not gonna change this language now.
I think
'cause
that's
that was-
probably fair based on
Okay.
what Dan said today.
And we'll have Dan work on amending some language for the petitions and to do a timeline, to hit every piece of the charter that deals with timelines on petitions. Even, public notices and so forth, and come back with a charter amendment for that.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think, as I understand, the intent of that review is to determine whether there are timelines that could be developed that would allow a town meeting within, and the budget validation referendum to take
Appropriate
place
time,
within the
so you're
30
not
days. Yeah.
jammed up.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Can I ask a question or make a comment?
At the end of the, when we get done with the charter amendments, yes.
Okay, well, this is about the charter.
Yeah, when we get done the first two, yes. Everybody will have a chance to speak. Next amendment.
Are you going on, you wanna do
Yeah, do you want me to
discontinued
just
roads?
explain those?
Yeah.
All right, so, the first amendment is a holdover from last year, where we wanted to, for major appropriations, to change the threshold from 100,000 to 250,000 for school expenditures. That got defeated last year, but I wanted to bring it back up again this year.
You said school, you meant capital.
Yeah.
You said school.
Yes, well, it is.
Okay.
School and
School,
capital.
it's school.
Right.
Both.
Two pieces?
For
Two
capital.
Yeah, school
Yeah, see, school for
municipal,
Okay.
they're
capital
under
equipment.
major appropriations.
Okay, okay.
They have to go to referendum, just like we do.
Same, it's the same criteria.
Same criteria.
Same criteria.
Yeah, so change it from 100,000 to 250,000.
Okay.
And then, under capital program, remember we made a change under A last year to submission to council on or before the first day of May. Well, what we failed to do was under C.
In the one you sent via email, it was. I don't think it is in this one.
No, where did I do? Copy that wrong. Anyway, there's 2 other dates in here that we need to change, and it's got to do with when the planning board has to. What did I do here?
I think you changed it. It was
I didn't
something for like
change it.
March and February, and you changed it to
Yeah.
July
I
1st.
think this date was this month was
That one's
originally
right.
changed, right?
Right, that one
And
is
so
right,
that requires,
right, I
the-
just
the
copied this
change
one.
of
Here we go.
the next
Okay,
two,
so,
yeah.
under C, we've gotta change that, the planning board will, forward their recommendations to council no later than the first day of June. Okay? okay? We had February, yeah, we didn't change it after we changed the one at the beginning. And then our action on the capital had March, which was a month later, so I changed that to on before the first day of July.
Yeah, that's what-
Just to make everything coincide, so just 2 date changes.
I don't see
And
it.
then the final one is, our authority to borrow or a major appropriation or to expend, just like the schools, change it from 100,000 to 250,000, which got defeated.
Beyond inflationary issues, what was the logic behind the 250 you guys came up with last year?
Basically, cause everything, costs so much now.
So it's just
Can't do
inflation,
all
It's just, yeah, you can't go buy, that's why we're
which
going.
we proved it just
Yeah.
this past year.
You can't go buy basically a good front end loader. I mean, we can't go out and really purchase a cabin chassis very easily or a complete truck.
Yeah, it's 2-year deal there for
But
financing
because it's
arrangement.
over that, you know.
And the other is when we have to do the work, the MDOT does their work. They're gonna be putting millions of dollars of road work into this community, and our share of that will be over that threshold, and we'd have to go to referendum.
Okay, so that's where we get in the predicament of the $1.8 million that we're
Yeah,
talking
and the
about for
thing
this,
of it is,
this
if
coming budget.
We have to sign a contract in advance.
No, I get that, it's just, but each individual MDOT project might be
Yes.
under the 250, so we would be able to
Right.
go at it that way
Exactly.
without having to.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
Okay.
just basically because everything is costing so much, that the charter is kind of old, so.
And the other thing is, if we did go to referendum on one of these road projects and it failed, we'd be on the hook for 100% of the engineering and right-of-way. Is that correct, Ryan? Isn't that what they said? If we didn't move forward with our portion of the project, so, I know, and it's
Yeah.
like,
When they're kicking in the 70%, you gotta pay your 30%, or you end up with a heck of a lot more in the bag of goods.
Yes.
so in some aspects, 250,000 might not be enough when you're looking at the road work. You
Yeah,
have
that
any
was,
idea, Ryan?
that would be my question to Ryan. I know he's sitting here because we got the benefit of him tonight. How- Like, the ones that are in the $1.8 million, they're on that discussion for the November timeframe. Are any above the $250,000 threshold?
I don't believe so, because I think we only have a 10% match on the project as a whole, so it'll be 180,000.
But it's above the,
But it's
above the
above
100, so
Yeah.
to the point that we're making here, it's above the 100, but it's not over the
I would,
250.
as a conservative, well, somewhat, I would go with, and not go over the 250. I would stay with the 250. For this town right now, that seems to work, you know.
Just using this project as the benchmark,
Right.
because it's a pretty significant
It
project.
is a real.
So.
No, I agree.
If we only required to pay 10%, so in this case, $180,000, it still leaves us a 70,000 cushion in case something large, it builds for inflation.
Yeah.
But, I don't imagine we're gonna get anything much larger coming at us in the very near future that wouldn't be able to
I'm
handle.
just looking down the road too at Public Works, their equipment is
Yep.
getting dilapidated, and we're really having to struggle now to keep
Yeah,
it under 100,000.
We need to give Ed the resources to be able to keep with his equipment purchases that he put us in that
Right.
capital improvement.
Right.
That's, we get off that, it's just gonna get more
Right.
expensive to replace these pieces.
Oh, we should follow, yeah, definitely
The
follow.
other thing is, 'cause I had this discussion with the attorney, is if they have all different PIN numbers, it would be all separate contracts, so they're all considered separate purchases. But if MDOT decided to combine everything into one PIN number, the 250 probably wouldn't be enough. If it's a $4 million project, it's gonna be $400,000.
Right. No, the point that I was trying to go for, Roger, in that dialogue is just, for the sake of not sitting in the room a year ago, what's the logic behind it, and voicing those kinds of concerns?
Basically,
Because
it
we got
was-
Ryan sitting right here.
Yeah,
The
no,
fact
but
is, it would
basically,
be really detrimental to
yeah.
either the purchase of his equipment or the paving
Yeah,
projects that we got it going.
Basically, we asked Mark Lund, because he has never come up, if it was a charter change that he would like to see.
Yeah,
That was his.
what it says,
So I commended him for, coming
Right.
up with it,
right.
was, I thought it was a very good idea for the that's $150,000 more than we got. And I'm wondering, people didn't swallow it last year. If we could go back and try to get more, they probably won't swallow it this
So,
time.
I think that's why we started with the 250.
No, more so, there's not much in the way of actually revisiting Bad Blood, but the first time through associated with the town garage, 250 probably would have worked, at least start that in the right direction. 100,000 wasn't able to do it, and this insurance proceeds just tainted the water this time around associated with that. Plus, it was the third time that it was something that was on the ballot that the voters were being asked to vote for.
Right,
If that threshold were more realistic to a start, it might not have died on the vine.
right. Very well. That's very well. I don't know, what do you think, Eric? I'm willing to go still
I'd
stay with the
say
250.
250, that's what I think.
Okay. I just wanted to have that dialogue, because where did the number come from, and we had opportunity
was
here. Yeah,
We
just,
were asking on a
yeah.
round table if there was any
Good.
charter changes that anybody wanted, and Mark came up with that one.
Good.
I don't think that, the last time around, if that number would have been pared down at 200,000, I don't think it was going through regardless, but,
I don't think it's about the dollar figure.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, I mean, this time around, at least we got something to qualify it up against and a little less.
Gotta have it for the,
And I,
Longer view of where we wanna go with the
Right.
capital improvement plan.
and what putting up that ability, I mean, putting up that ability to be able to meet our obligations, in this case, the MDOT obligation, what that gets us, gets our community, and the work that's gonna be done. 'Cause it's not just that, I mean, that's just to cover that project, but we're also getting, aren't they, they're doing the trench for the natural gas line, and we have to pay a small portion, is that part of this?
We haven't worked out the details on that.
But
plan at this point.
That's part of this project though, isn't it?
It's, in conjunction with, but it was not anything with DOT, it would be with.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
it's a town, it's a town dealing with
Unitil
Unitil.
as
Okay.
part of an
As
MDOT
part of
project.
Okay, so then forgive me for lumping it in there if that wasn't the case, I
Third-party
didn't wanna,
arrangement.
It's a third-party arrangement.
okay.
You're exactly right.
But would've cost us a whole lot more standalone to go talk to Unitil and get
Yeah.
that done by ourselves, so
Yeah,
the fact that we're
he
already.
did that once, and it scared the tar out of us.
The fact that they're already here doing work anyway allows us that opportunity to have a conversation which has turned into something, so.
Has a real impact on the infrastructure that we can do
Huge.
downtown associated with that for future development too.
Yeah, that offers up,
It's not just the Main Street corridor, there's a little bit more associated with this for development in general.
it's more low-cost energy to businesses and to homes, and so, never a bad opportunity when we can improve that stuff.
So that will
I
be all
I
set.
got nothing more on that one.
Yeah, I think I'm
Cassie?
on board, I'm on board.
I understand the concept behind it, but the part of me that's sticking is the fact that the voters voted it down.
Well, hopefully this year,
And they
we
might
can't-
very well again.
They
Yes,
might
we
very
can't
well
control
again,
that.
but we can try.
Right, but then that's the part is, for me, that was my running thing, was that if it was the majority that voted, that's what I would go with, and
I think it's, I think to kind of go to Roger's point a little bit, this is a presidential election, a pretty polarizing one at that, so I think there's gonna be a pretty significant turnout. So if it's a loud no, I think it's, pardon me, if it's a no this time, then it's a loud no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I just,
Topics
Go
done.
through this November, you're getting a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
of where people's heads.
right, but I also don't wanna keep on putting out the same thing over and over, cause it's not the answer that
Now, this
people
is the
wanna
first
hear.
time, basically, last week was,
The reason we're bringing this up again is mainly because of those road projects that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, if there was no,
Because if we go to referendum and it gets turned down for our share of that, then
it's gonna cost
We
the
heard
town a
what-
lot
cost
of
the
money.
town a lot of money.
A lot more than
As long as it goes to the voters again, and this time,
Yep.
whatever the answer is what we go with, and then if
Right.
it's a no, we don't revisit it.
All
I'm
right.
good.
Sounds good.
works for me.
Yeah, cause if it's a no,
Okay.
they're going down to
All right,
$1.8
Dot,
million.
you get a
It's going
chance to
hell
speak.
quick.
They're throwing away all that money.
It's going
Yeah, you
down.
too, Larry.
hell quick. Yeah.
Going back to the vote on the town budget, you've been going back and forth on referendum and town meeting. Is that an either or? That would concern me because I love town meeting. I always went to the town meeting and that is the voice of the voter. But what concerns me, we've had these workshops on budget and we don't have any turnout. workshops, especially, the school budget, we do, we have great turnout, but a lot of the people attending are school students, high school students or whatever, and, if it's the town budget, there aren't many that
Nobody
show
shows up.
A referendum, people can go in and vote, way to work, come from work, whatever the schedule allows them. And I love town meetings, so these are things,
It's gonna be considered very, it's gonna be considered very significantly before anything is done.
yeah, it needs to be,
Yeah.
you have to go back and look at, the town is
Larry?
Yeah, the short answer associated with that too.
I have two things. The first one is for Mrs. Stafford.
You can call me Dan.
Tell me, Bob, too.
Wow,
The
that's
one
cold.
thing that in
You're the Rodney Dangerfield of this workshop.
that really disturbs me is that when the petition is drawn up and worded, and prior to going to gather signatures, it is reviewed by an attorney, okay, to have the wording correct, and it be all dress right dress. Then you go out and you get all the signatures, you bring it back in. The only thing that's been added is the signatures, and now the petition is not legally sufficient. That should never happen. If it is approved prior to gathering signatures, and the only thing added is signatures, no way should the wording be wrong. That's my opinion. That's only my opinion. And I know how much it means in this form, okay?
Can I respond, or?
I don't care.
Go ahead.
That's your option.
I know the response.
Well,
but coming from you.
just to explain to you sort of what my role as town
I'm not
attorney.
a sir either.
Yeah, I mean, my role is not to provide advice
Everybody's
to
a
the
sir,
petitioners. So, and in fact, it would be inappropriate for me to be advising a particular group of private citizens about the language for an article. And so it really, the issue of whether it's sufficient is really only teed up when it's presented with enough signatures and I get a request from the town, is this legally sufficient? I mean, is it appropriate for the town to be spending legal resources on getting an opinion from me before you have a valid petition? So, I mean, that's the reason, and that's consistent with the advice that Maine Municipal Association gives, that the municipal attorney should not be providing
And that's
advice
exactly
to.
when I went to do the same thing, we're trying to get a charter, well, almost the same words that Roger Terrio told me. They do what you wanna do, I don't care what lawyer you wanna get to certify it, when it comes back to me, it's gotta pass me, if it doesn't pass,
I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
I never said that. What I'm saying is, there was no need for the first one to go through the process, and then the only thing that was added were the signatures, then how
but
come
he wasn't the one that certified it. It has to be him.
Right, I think what Larry's trying to say is when the last petitioners committee, when it was presented, we were told that before we could get signatures, it had to go to the attorney to be approved.
Right.
Once it was approved, the language, then we were given the petition blanks, sent out to go get our signatures, and then came back, and then it had to be approved a second time.
And I think
I mean, I guess my bottom line is,
money the first
if the,
time.
right, if the council wants me to be opining whenever you get a proposed petition about the sufficiency and whether, I can do that at that stage, but, you know, I think
Doesn't
you
matter
really
if you
need,
have enough
you as the
signatures.
council really need to make that decision.
Right.
But at the end is that it was okay the first time in order to be given the petition blanks, and then once the signatures were collected, And then it came back.
But the town council can have him make it right the first time.
right, but you're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
No, I know what you're saying, it's just, it doesn't pass, it might pass a certain attorney's muster, but it doesn't pass his muster. That's what I'm saying.
Our legal counsel.
That's,
Right,
not-
yeah.
that's, I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying, is,
yeah.
but what I'm saying is, I have the petition language right here.
Right.
Okay, I bring this into Twyla and I say, this is my petition, I'd like my petition blanks. What we were told was, this petition that I handed before I even got my petition blanks had to go to Dan to be looked at first, and then approved. And then it came back, yes, it's approved, here's your petition blanks, go get your signatures. We get our signatures, we come back, here's all of our signatures, they're certified, then it goes back to Dan to be approved. If it wasn't good the first time around, that should have been caught, it shouldn't have been denied the second time.
I mean, I think I made clear
Am I correct?
at the time that it was initially presented that I was not opining on the sufficiency of the language. So, but again, if the council wants me to be playing that role at that stage, I can do it. But I think that's really a
Needs to be
decision that
clear
you
on what
should
the
make.
direction you
Yeah,
need to
Yeah.
yeah, right. What do you?
Roger, I think
what
that's
role do you
important,
play?
Yeah.
Yes.
because then we're not wasting citizens'
Time.
time.
Well,
money,
if it ever happens
everything.
again, then you will have to make sure that the council sitting
Is
is
reminded.
agreeable to do that.
Is reminded.
Yeah.
Understand. The second thing I had was, I have heard that we don't get enough folks to come out and vote in June. And I agree for the most part. On a normal June, we don't get hardly anybody out, less than 5%. But if the people want something,
They'll show up.
they come out. In fact, if you ask Twyla, I think she will confirm that when the bonds came up for the gym, the track, public works garage there, we had more people vote than the last gubernatorial election. So if the people want something, they'll come out and vote. And so they don't come out, I gotta have it.
Let's hope they come out and vote in November, okay?
Keep in mind, that was a
There won't
very
be
close
anybody
vote,
missing
too.
in November.
That was a very
It-
close vote.
Regardless if it was close or not, the people came.
Okay,
But if it'd been in November, I think you might have seen a different turnout.
oh,
That's just my point, that's my opinion.
what do we got here now? Discontinued road?
Thank you.
Good save. Good save, Roger. Good save. That's a good save,
Okay,
Roger.
Ryan, there's a
Redirect.
chair right there, sit right there.
Thank you.
I was gonna tell you.
Okay, let me bring you up to speed. Me and Ryan have kinda gone back on this a long time. Started way back, I don't know, when I was probably a sophomore on the council. My basic, and I did bring this up because of what it is. It was, at times, I'm gonna say right now that the town is actually plowing private driveways. But that's not my major concern because that's not all that expensive to the town. My concern is some of these discontinued roads or roads that we maintain are driveways. And some of them, one of them up on the Webster Road has a huge parcel of property right next to it, a nice big field. If they ever sold that field and a developer came in, we would have to bring that road up to specifications. And we have a lot of roads around this town that are like that. I mean, we've got a road right next to the Big Apple in Lisbon Falls. It's a straight shot. How many feet is it? It's not even as long as this,
350.
350 feet. We have to plow. There's a house down at the other end. Donald Stein goes in and plows the driveway for him, but it's just a little driveway.
That's Bayberry you're talking
Yep.
about.
What about Androscoggin Street? How long?
740 feet.
We plow one house at the top. We plow it to that. Everybody know where Androscoggin Street is? When you turn to go across the railroad tracks,
Oh, yeah.
to go to Campbell's,
Oh, yeah,
go up
Yeah.
there, one house. We plow it.
Really?
It's a
Clovis
driveway.
really?
The other one
Yeah,
I'm
it
talking,
is.
the other one I'm talking about is John Jalbert's.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I know Jalbert's, yeah.
That's the one,
That on
one of them was, but then we've got, some, roads out where Steve Welch lived.
I don't know.
Okay.
Huh? No, that's the county road, old county road.
You get Cody Lane on there too? There's only one house on that road.
That's the old
I
county
don't
road.
know as though we do that one though, Cody Lane.
No, you
I
don't?
think that might be I don't know.
Right off of Summit, so there used to
I
be
know
two,
what you're
used to be
talking
used to be two houses there, one of them burned to the ground,
Just
and there's
before
only one
Liberty
left.
Street, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If I may comment?
Yep.
The gentleman that lives in the last house down in Cody Lane,
Yeah.
he follows
pl-
that road.
Thank you.
I didn't think,
I wasn't sure if it was on there, I was just curious.
it's not listed on here, no.
Well, now we got an
Thank
equity
you.
issue. Now we got an equity issue.
Yeah.
He plows his driveway. Why are we plowing this?
Now we get it.
All I'm
No,
saying,
no. I'm saying to the guy on Cody. The fact is,
and we just.
he'd
had-
like the same service.
And we just had a incident on the planning board where a town employee bought a piece of property and built in a house and didn't know, and
Oh yeah,
he wanted,
yeah.
yeah, he wanted his,
I'm with you.
you know. So I think
Like a daycare.
That's the
whether
daycare.
we don't need to do it all, but I really think for the town, we ought to look at some of these roads, let him decide which ones maybe.
I have a question.
Hey,
How do you fit a plow?
your shoulders are extra broad today, aren't they?
'Cause I know when I pulled in, my husband
I think he just
touched one
decided.
building and I touched the other. He was in the driver's seat, I was in the passenger.
But a lot of these roads, we really ought to think about.
That was a scary road.
I've been along, we started the process on Androscoggin Street, but our former town manager forgot to send the guy the letter.
Well, we sent the letter, and he didn't like the response.
Well, you know, I don't think it was the letter was
Oh,
sent, but
different
not by our former town manager, I think it was by the interim town manager.
So do you want Dan to tell you what the process is for some
Yeah.
of these?
Yeah.
Because we already researched one of the streets. and,
Awesome.
you know.
Yeah, so just a little bit of the legal landscape. Giving you legal advice, my advice to you is you shouldn't be plowing private roads or
'Cause you're
driveways.
liable too, right?
Um,
You're after that
so-
road, you're gonna fix it.
Only,
Or parking lot.
only if,
Fine, that's okay. So we'll get to
only
that.
if you, it's either a town way or there's a public easement over it that's recognized. And there's a Maine Supreme Judicial Court case that found that the legislature actually passed a law that allowed for plowing of private roads. And the law court said that that law was illegal because the Maine Constitution says that public funds are supposed to be used for a public purpose. So, at least in theory, by plowing public ways or roads, there could be a legal challenge to that. Now, somebody would have to assert that, but,
My thing wasn't even on the plowing, because that really does not get to that expense on some of these small ones, but it's
Yeah.
what could happen if somebody comes in and buys a large piece of property, and we have a way going through, and then the contractor says, well, I'm putting 15 houses in here, but I want this brought up to town specs. That's our responsibility to bring it up to town specs. That's where it gets costly.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think that would happen if the town has effectively acquired a public easement over it by
Yeah.
continuous use. But
Well,
it would
they've been
that would have to be
they've
for,
been continually plowing it for years.
that would have to be
so-
extended time period, yeah.
So do we become liable because you've
Yeah.
been doing it for so long?
Yeah.
Or, is it?
A claim could be made
Right.
that,
But then you have the law
yeah.
court ruling.
Although, as a practical matter, by extended plowing, the most you would acquire would be a public easement rather than actual ownership of the road. And generally, when the town has a public easement, that is different from a town way as far as your obligation to maintain it. So you have an obligation to maintain town ways and to plow them and to keep them open. You don't have that same obligation for property that you have a public easement over. So if you were to discontinue plowing and somebody was to come forward and say, well, hold it, you've been plowing that for over 20 years, therefore there's a public easement. Well, if they can establish a public easement, it's still discretionary on your part as to whether you're going to plow it. So I'm not sure that that type of claim really gets somebody very far by claiming that it's a public easement. But, you know, a lot of municipalities wrestle with this problem, you know, because
Other than
it's
plowing,
not
do you end up with
unusual.
maintenance
Any
issues?
sort of precedent that we can look at, or a
Or
ton of it?
I mean, the bottom line is,
Is this
you
the
know,
parking lot right here that you plow?
the best practice is not to plow public,
Sure, that's fine.
not to plow private ways.
We're already in, so like you said, the worst possible case scenario is we back out. But if we're gonna back out on this, then just kind of throwing it out there, if we decide that we aren't gonna plow particular roads, are we gonna give some sort of heads up to these folks
That's what
prior
we were
to?
gonna try
Right,
to
you'd
do.
have to let them know ahead of time.
Yeah, give them a fair shake to say, hey, that way, they do come back with a claim of some type, we can say, we made it clear to you, not, December 24th,
Right.
but, sometime
That's
in
the first
fall,
good
yeah, fall or whatever.
Send out the letters in a week or two, or let's say a month,
Yeah.
and say, we're not
Oh,
gonna
so we
be,
put, you
And then
should
hit
be
them one
doing
more
all of
time,
this?
even again in the fall, just to
On
say,
top of this?
we're not kidding. We're definitely not gonna be plowing these roads, we wanna make that clear to you so you can put, get other arrangements together.
We need to give it to those businesses that are in there.
Thanks.
that,
When you talked about doing work on a public way, we had an issue that we've been wrestling with for a little bit too, where we've got this red, orange, whatever, pink, salmon colored
Right.
section is the lot
Salmon.
the town
Parking
actually
lot.
owns down in Lisbon Falls. However, we've been plowing the entire parking lot down there, all behind the old Down East building, next to the lodge, behind all the businesses there. And questions raised about, again, doing plowing, or doing public works work on private property. I'm not sure if there was any agreements in the past that were made, and that's why we were doing this, but,
Businesses love it.
So you're saying we're doing everything outside of this, all of
it
this,
takes forever, and we do everything.
and we're doing all of this?
And all we really need to do is plow in a couple straight shots and we'd be done.
A lot of liability.
But there's
Yeah,
also,
and these are all,
Get one
yeah,
of
these
these
are all.
cars while you're in there, then we have.
there's
to
also
pay
that
for
doesn't hurt me.
all kinds of decorative lighting that's all around there too that we maintain. That's why I don't know what the history is, but it was something that was brought up. And
I mean, that's all expense, it's all expense.
I mean, another legal consideration just is that if the town is plowing a private property or a private road, there's some question as to whether the liability protections that you normally enjoy under the Maine Tort Claims Act apply
right.
in that case, because the town is doing something that is not a public function at that point, it's a private function.
Well, I do know, and then kind of jokingly, but, you, Public Works employee can't take a pickup home, plow his driveway. That's a no-no. Well, what's the difference in him taking that same pickup and going down private lots? That's a no-no too. It's,
And he's getting paid to do it.
yeah, and he's getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
Not quickly, because it's a pain in the ass.
But,
Well, they're getting paid to
Yeah,
plow this.
Oh, I know what I'm saying. He's not getting paid quickly, because that's
No.
a pain in the ass to
I
get
guess
that. Where you
the
putting
thing
the
for
snow?
me is that every other private business in this community has to pay to have the parking lot plowed, and they have to pay somebody to clear their walkways. They gotta pay somebody to clear their walkways, they gotta pay somebody to plow their parking lots, and these
What about
particular
the area
private, folks
all done
don't.
privately?
it's not anymore, it was us because the town office used to be.
Right,
there, so
that's why I was
we no
asking.
longer own it, we don't do it.
So now that we're no longer on that block, we don't have
Stop
anything
doing
behind,
that.
it's just the other side of it. And then you got an equity on which side of Main Street you're on.
What, since I've been kind of involved in this for a long time, what would be, if I get together with Diane and Ryan and we could go over and come up with some kind of a substantial list and bring it to council?
Of all of these kind of things?
All these kind of things. We'd sit down and discuss whatever it is, then come in, if we're gonna close it, we close it.
I think it'd be a good discussion to actually have prior to the next budget for sure, because we
Yeah.
obviously just did this one. We basically putting people on notice on what we're looking
You want
at.
it before that, or you want it?
I would like to do it
Yeah, I mean,
before this winter.
that's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying the same thing. It's already budgeted, but it's a discussion that needs to happen.
Let's-
Point that I didn't even
Yeah.
consider
If we
it.
get-
I agree with
They
you.
could stop it because of the liability, they could just stop plowing.
Get this
you know,
thing
get the
moving now
letters
so we're
going
ready
out,
to,
so.
if we're
Well,
gonna
it's-
act.
Well, we have the torts,
And
we have the
plus, talking
liability, if
about-
we damage the property,
Talking
then
about
we're
budget monies that
responsible.
could be next year, we don't have
Maintaining
to.
lighting that we don't own.
Yeah,
I don't know about, and that's,
But
it's
Ray-
all tied off to the same,
I mean, I get,
and I don't know how, when it was installed, how it was installed.
was this Houston back in the day?
Huh?
Brian's got something.
I actually mentioned something about that if I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'd like to have your input on it.
As-
Yeah.
And this goes back as a business owner, the hardest thing about this lot, and maybe that the town attorney can actually break that up, I think you'll find that before you do that, it'd be very important for the business owners to realize what property they do own, what they don't, because you're gonna find that there's probably a lot of unwritten lines back there, and you're gonna have a lot of people saying, well, what do I own, what don't I own, do I own what I don't own?
Right.
You're gonna find those lines are really gonna be not there, because a lot of these buildings are actually multiple tenants under the same roof, and I don't think even in their easements, there's actually probably lines in that parking lot. That's my own, because knowing what's around there, I know even behind where the old town office was, if you ask four of those people who owns what back there,
Yeah.
they're gonna give you a totally different opinion, but they'll.
If you got
they'll-
there first, you own it today.
You won't find someone go back and survey that, because there's so much of a mess, and I'm just wondering on this, you know,
Do they
before
own
you
it, or
actually.
do we own it, though?
Well, the question would be I mean, to you as being a servant of the town, I think you owe it to the people there before you just say, I'm not plowing it, to actually help them determine what they are responsible for and what they're not responsible for, because you're gonna find that it's very questionable back there as far as who owns what. And it really was not be fair to the first snowstorm, people actually drawing lines saying, well, I'm gonna plow here, or I'm gonna plow here, because the person that's gonna push the snow from here, you know where he's gonna go with it, because if he owns a spot in the middle and has no place to go with it, it's gonna go someplace that you don't want it to go, because it just magically can't disappear. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, we could talk
that's
about
one thing
that.
that happened with the town, is they all scooped it in one area, when it got to be big enough, they actually had it removed. The downfall was if you have 10 different tenants back here, now they have to have some type of game plan ahead of time
Where
to
it's
actually
going.
figure out how to make that work. And again, it's just as a business owner, I would actually be freaking out saying, oh my God, so you draw me the lines out here where I gotta pay to take care of, and you're gonna have a lot of people. And when you get behind like the doctor's office there for the eye, and where Morse Brothers was, you know, and with, you know, even right now Frosty,
Well,
as far as the right of way through there, I mean, to me, it would have to be pretty established before you actually just said you're
What
in
I'm
the road
saying
where
is
things
if,
are.
if we, let's say somebody down there running the front end loader, and the loader got away from them, and they had it, and they ran into a building that we weren't supposed to be plowing, then we're not gonna be insured for it. You know,
Which is no problem. I mean, I think if you're telling the people that, but I think at the end of the day, I think it
It's
comes
only
down
fair
to
to
the
them.
idea of you need to, put it this way, is the decorative lighting that Ryan's talking about, I don't think any of those business owners out there can actually point at one and say, that's mine.
Well,
Right.
we
You know, I-
maintain it, and we pay
Yeah.
for it, this is
Yeah.
all off from our service. That's
Yeah.
why I say, I don't know if, and there may have been agreements made,
Right.
how long
Yeah.
ago, between the property owners and the town, and
Handshake.
it's-
You know, I'm working on a piece of property right now where you look in and there's actually, that one piece of property, there's up to 7 different right-of-way easements that go over a certain area, and I'm looking back in that right-of-way coming to the back of that shopping mall. You know what I mean, it isn't the person who owns the corner on the end that knows responsible for that, because that easement actually responsible for pretty much, you know. You know, it's one of those things, it would just be nice to have that type of stuff cleared up prior to the idea of just changing the policy.
1, 2, 3, 4,
And even like on
5 in this little
Androscoggin Road,
building.
I mean, that used to be the 196, and I know the water department
No,
actually
post
uses
office
that
is
quite
right
heavily
here.
for the last few years,
that is
because,
good, they've
Then you
got,
got
they've
1,
got an
2.
easement.
because of water main through there, so whether or
You got
not
5
you actually.
here.
That one is not, we can shut that one off. That was
Because you've
what
got
we
the
did
old
before.
vet, Tangles,
as long as the water department has
Beauty
access to
Have an
Box,
easement.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't.
Yeah,
the
there's-
laundromat
there's
and
5
Canton.
businesses, 2
Could
owners.
we,
Right.
She
could
owns
we
3 of those.
continue maintaining
5
this
businesses,
and
2
actually
here.
charge
Two there.
all these different businesses so that
No.
it's not
No.
costing us, or no?
No, we can't charge, we can't remove, can't plow private.
But we own this.
We own this, you
Yeah,
can
we
plow
own
this.
If we plowed this, but we cannot remove the snow from here and here and here.
Right.
That's state law.
I mean, the way the assessment's done, and you may be able to go to the tax map and find out exactly who's paying which taxes on which piece of pavement.
Yeah.
I don't know how that was arranged last time, Ryan, when that was all paved back there, whether it was actually municipally done, or if it was actually a conjunction of, you know, properties, because, you know, it's,
This area right here?
So is there any way that we can go back and look to see who owns what first before we start sending out any letters? Okay.
That little green line
Really?
kind of shows
I'm
you
dead
how it's
serious on
run
that one.
anyway.
Yeah, 'cause
They're
you're
all
right.
green space.
I'm
Where-
good.
where?
Green space.
So that's like right next to the buildings, but then there's another block right here.
All of that. I made green space, and the next season they took the sign
Basically, what
down and they
I'm looking
paved
at
it.
is, this parking lot is kind of
Just
different
slap
from
in
when I
the
started, so I wanted to do something on
True
that.
story.
I think the purpose of this meeting
Good
tonight
project,
is
Mr.
to
Roy.
get
Mr.
direction of where to go.
Ron
And
Marios.
we do have some more work
Give me the
before
guy.
we have to
Yeah.
notify
Yeah, Fred's a good
people,
guy.
but
I
The
say
last I
figure
knew,
out who owns what
Fred
before
had
we
it in his basement and signed for that project.
jump
He
the
just
gun.
lost his wife.
Did he?
I know what, I know Androscoggin Street, Water Department's got an easement on it, so you don't need to plow it, cause they can do whatever they want on it, which they've already put a new main in anyway.
I think it's a good idea, Roger, like you said, to kind of compile a list and see what right now we're doing, and maybe determine whether we should be doing it anymore.
And also letting, to Fern's point, know the fact is what you actually have from a vested interest
I
in.
know on, the road I used, just talk, the old county road. As that goes up in, we just got rid of a trailer up there.
Yep.
Houston bought it, that we took on back taxes. And if anybody really wanted to push on that, get up in there, we could have to go up and maintain that road that was built up there. I know I was real worried about Steve Welch, because he wanted, when he was down there, he wanted us to blow out so the water would run good, so we could plow good, and there's wells next to the road. What do you do to the well, you know?
Don't use the
We're liable for this stuff, so. And he's a good friend of mine, I don't want, but, there's a lot of this little stuff, and there's other stuff out there that,
Well, it's not little stuff when you put it cumulatively all together
Cost, I
on
can't
a
imagine,
public
just one
works
storm,
winter
how much,
budget.
yeah.
Or
And
even,
ultimately, you're looking at least one route.
that's what I'm saying.
Worth of extra work.
yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean,
Right.
doing it for 100 years or
But the-
whatever, so it's.
Like you said, the guys are taxed as it is right now, you pull us one, yeah.
But all it takes is for somebody to know that, oh, they're taking care of my road and they damaged it, and then they're taking us to court.
Dan, you got any more input on this?
No, I mean, my advice to you would be that to the extent that, to the extent that you don't own
Don't.
the land or have an interest in it,
Right,
that the appropriate thing to do is to not be maintaining it.
yeah.
So, but that's your legal advice. Then there's the practical advice or practical considerations that you need to consider.
Perhaps all the business owners could get together and they could hire one individual to do it, you know. and-
To push the snow right into that corridor, so we have to pick it up?
Ryan, aren't you in that business?
All right, so we'll do some more, we'll get
More
together the
research.
list, and, we may need to have, Dan Stockford help us.
Yep.
We have-
I do know that Mr. Bickford on Androscoggin Street had received a letter once, and he wasn't real happy about it. But he get the letter, I think, kinda late to start with.
Well, that's why we wanted to start
Right.
this now, so that we could get it out.
Maybe is it feasible
what
to
else
send
you
a
got in
letter
that
saying
folder, Boris?
we're in the process of investigating, da 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 da. If it is determined that the property that we have been plowing is not ours, then we will be ceasing. So that way they're getting kind of a heads up, and then they'll get a follow-up letter.
Dan about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it.
Okay.
I guess my thought on it is it potentially creates a lot of agitation.
Either
depending
way,
on-
it's going to.
Right, exactly. It's going to, yeah.
I would just rather
Yeah.
give them a
So it
heads
would
up
be-
that it's
yeah.
being looked into, and
Yeah.
if it turns out that it isn't our property, then
Yeah.
we won't be.
Combination of both, something definitely are still town, they are town ways.
They paved my project, I'm not sympathetic.
Was-
It's a true story.
This is your karma, huh?
Yeah.
Wasn't there another road that we,
You know
they
how much
wanted it to
auto
be a
parts
town
and
way,
crap I
and
pulled
we
out of that area?
refused?
Did a fine job.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
did.
thanks.
They put in
That
some
was probably
nice,
one of the better streets in town.
oil-based asphalt.
Okay, next item would be David Street speed bumps or stop signs.
I did some research. This is, some language from the Maine Local Roads, Education Center through DOT. Copy the link at the bottom so you can see where it came from. The first sentence tells it all.
Ryan, did you wanna come sit up here? Yeah, love to. You might have some input on this.
And I also just, because pictures are worth 1,000.
Just give me all of those. This one at a time crap is not gonna fly.
We're gonna get out of here about 11. Ryan, there you go. I don't need two, but somebody's got one?
Sorry, you hit me.
Sign up. I sign up.
Sort of.
Right after this meeting, we'll pool over in that pool.
I got a question for Ryan.
Which Ryan?
You. Well, both of them, you can come up with the,
Legit.
it says it doesn't work. But the town did it on Wing Street, and the town did it all through Houston Park, and it seems to work very well there. And there wasn't any, we didn't have to put an ordinance, and we probably got one, if we did it, right there, okay.
All the stop signs in town right now are designated through ordinance. I printed off 15 pages or whatever it was that lists them all out. Because after going through initial DOT training, it look, because I mean, the three-way stop, just as they're saying here, the stop signs for traffic calming, in their opinion, are not recommended. And that's when they are all through Houston Park.
Right.
And that's why I went to see why they were there, and that's when I found out that this was a couple years ago, that they are there because they were voted on to be there.
Right.
So that's the direction.
The secretary was was the main one.
I've heard. So if that's the direction that the council would like to go, then that's the process that would need to happen, is that they would have to vote for, I don't know if it'd be an ordinance change or what, but they would have to be designated by the town council to be placed.
It was an option besides the speed bumps. It seemed to work in Houston Park. It works on Wing Street.
Where are you suggesting putting them, Roger?
Yeah.
Basically, on Davis Street, where you come out of Ann Street. Be one there, and then a stop ahead, just about like on Wing Street. It would be up by the pumping station coming towards the walking path. And then when you come around the corner, going the other way, you could have a stop ahead.
You
And
wanna
then
stop right here, right at Ann Street?
No, yeah.
You'd have a
You'd have a
Three-way
three-way stop.
Okay,
Just
I
like they
gotcha.
have on Wing Street.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about right down here.
Exactly like what it is on Wing Street.
How many houses are on that road?
Ann?
One.
On Ann Street, not two.
It's not about Ann Street. It's not about Ann Street.
He's about
He's
the
putting
flow
it
of
here,
traffic.
so he's slowing it down coming that way.
That's where the traffic problem is. He's on,
Right, right.
So it'd just be a
That's
matter
where
of
the
throwing
traffic-
two in the other.
the speed bumps, that was something, and I don't think stop signs cost as much.
Page 2 of your staple tells you why you shouldn't do speed bumps.
Yeah. You're not supposed to do anything, just let the little kids get run
Well,
over.
no, because the recommendation is the speed hump, which is a designed, engineered,
Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And people still go
Yeah.
flying over
Boston
those.
To see if they can get air over that.
Oh, yeah.
But the way I
You're
looked at
responsible
it,
in a minivan, by the way.
the way I looked at it
So you
myself,
have to,
and I'm
right?
not a professional, but that would, I've talked to the people down there that wanted the speed bumps, and they would go with a stop sign. And then Mr. Neto has complained a little bit on Free Street, which I do know people fly down there. And I couldn't see why that couldn't happen on Free Street about halfway down, maybe on North, four-way stop.
If I
So,
may
yeah.
add something, because you asked my,
Right.
I guess it would be a professional opinion as well. With Davis Street, we have gotten complaints in the past, probably from some of the people that I've spoken to. Not a lot of complaints, very few. Officers did go down there to do traffic enforcement. And we all know if we see a police car sit on the side of the road, we're gonna abide the speed limit. Davis Street, there's not a lot of great places to stop. You know, back, however, there was an individual that we were able to charge that was driving very recklessly on Davis Street. You know, way back when we had our Houston Park Community Policing Group's meetings, and there was a lot of issues in Houston Park with people speeding, like everywhere in town. People are gonna speed, whether it's School Street or gross development, there's speeding everywhere.
I called one in last week.
Absolutely, and what I will
My
say,
street's a dead end.
And what
Where
I-
are you going?
what I will say is that most certainly we can put a police officer from, as soon as we get the complaint, absolutely. As soon as the officer's free, they're gonna go to that location and do traffic enforcement. But unfortunately, sometimes it's a temporary fix. It may slow them down for a little bit, and it may slow them down that week or maybe longer. Who's to say for sure? Where you just said Ann Street and Davis Street, because I got an email a week ago that there was gonna be a meeting about this. I did, I went down there and looked. We have a speed trailer that we just recently got fixed, which is great, so we can put that in different locations. But again, it's more of a good reminder to remind people, hey, you need to slow down, please, help us out. There's kids on the street, just put it on School Street. It's tough to get in different spots where you're not obstructing the public way or the sidewalk, but the main goal is to get people to slow down. I do know that sometimes, myself included, anybody's guilty of it. All of a sudden you come across, you just realize you're going a little bit too quick. I've seen in other communities, they've got the orange flags on the side of the speed limit signs. They're all reminders. I know every now and then, and I have been looking, I looked the other night after I got this email about speed limit signs, uses grant money sometimes, and I'll continue to look for speed limit signs. But these stop signs in Houston Park definitely, I would say, in my years here, they did slow people down.
We're all used to it now, we know we gotta stop.
Yeah, you gotta stop. I got in trouble when I first started here because I was stopping people on the mountain bike. They put me on the mountain bike, I'm like, I'm gonna go over to Houston Park and slow people down, but, you don't do mountain bike patrol as much, but with times, there's less than when I started here for police officers, and I would say that, a stop sign in the middle of the street, in my opinion, I think, my feeling is that would probably slow people down in the middle of the road. I know those mobile homes, there's a lot of kids that live in the mobile homes before the walking trail, and I know Davis Street's loaded with kids. So,
See, my problem is, you don't get a lot of complaints. Well, 3 of the residents that live in the trailer park, and one owns a house, but 2 of them, they work at Advanced Auto Parts. So guess who, when I come through the door to get past, guess what's gonna
I know
happen?
who they are. Good people, yeah.
And, I'm getting it all the time, so all I said is, I'll see what we can do, give some options.
Yeah.
We talked about speed bumps, now it's stop signs. And I do know that Mr. Neto has complained to me over the years on Free Street, and I do know that even myself, once in a while, I'll get down Free Street going a little fast, and there are kids playing there. So I was just kinda wondering, will it work there? I know it works fantastic on Wing Street.
Do we have any slow children at play signs in that area? If we have that many kids?
I've tried getting those on Moody Road and been told if I wanted to purchase a sign.
Yeah, well, a lot of them, even the farm tractor signs, they gotta purchase them.
I mean, the good thing about signs is signs are a great reminder, and they're fairly inexpensive compared to actual physical construction, but a reminder's good for everybody, myself included. I'm human just like anybody else, so.
I just thought that was the most invasive. You don't have to remove them because they're not bumps, and it's like everybody said, you go bumps, everybody's gonna want them. Well, really, stop signs aren't that very hard to put up or take down. If somebody gets real sick of them, just go take them down. That's what his job is, to put them up and take them down.
But to your point, they need to be approved at specific
The location
locations.
needs to be, yeah, and that, I mean, I just looked at, it's about, to do with the Ann Street location, be $200.
Right.
Just to buy the signs.
Right.
Poles and stuff, it's
What
just-
about, let's say if we wanted to combine it and do Free Street too, what would that be, another couple hundred? 'Cause that's-
Yeah, the signs were like $80-something a piece, and then, because there was the stop sign itself and then the 3-way stop, little tag that goes below the stop sign.
I know when I was younger and they did Houston Park, I used to curse and swear, and what stupid idiot ever did this, but as I got older, I see, you got kids running around, and they don't pay attention.
What's the speed limit on Davis Street?
25 miles an hour. And I'm not blaming anybody, and I will not, but people have said that since that new garage opened up down there, there's been a lot more traffic, when there would be. with people going in to get their cars fixed. And we also have a walking path going down through there, so I'm
Yeah,
thinking safety that way.
I would say the walking path.
That's the thing,
The
I guess.
biggest thing
I'm-
there is
yeah.
lack of parking in that area, and I know the sidewalk is gonna address that, so, yeah.
So I'm just-
People going to the garage.
Yeah.
The strategic thing, are we talking about Ann Street? That's where you're talking about putting those? Cause I'm looking at the trailer park's up farther ahead there, so if somebody's coming
I would
from
say put
196 down Davis, they still
I
got a
would,
pretty good
about
little
where the pumping
raceway to
station
go.
is, Coming down Davis Street, I'd put if you can visual, Wing Street.
Yeah.
It's just, you got a sign up here that says, stop ahead.
Right.
And then you got both ends. And you got double reminders.
No, I ride that,
Oh, and you're
ride
not
that park
tearing
with
it
my
up for.
daughter, on
Oh,
bicycles.
Not having to remove the speed bumps and it's to me,
Stop
it's a
signs are
good,
the lesser of the two evils for sure, as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned.
you know, and at least we can say to the people down there, we tried. And that's all I'm saying, 'cause I wanna be able to say, well, we tried. If it doesn't work, that's your job.
So Ann Street's a three-way stop, is the concept that we're talking about?
Well, Ann Street already has a stop
Well, yeah,
sign.
I'm
Yeah,
just
it's just-
rather
it's
do
two the other way.
rather two of those.
On Davis Street, there's
Right.
Yeah.
But neither one of the trailer park driveways, I don't believe, have stop signs coming out.
Yeah, that's the thing, I guess. I'm looking at that.
I don't know
How that, I wouldn't,
mandate that.
You know, somebody coming down that corridor, they're doing 112 miles an hour until they get to that stop sign.
Well, yeah, I don't know. All I'm trying to do is slow down the traffic on Davis Street. Basically for the people that have asked and the people who are gonna be walking down or riding their bicycle down the sidewalk.
I would say there's definitely more foot traffic on Davis Street in my years of patrol, just since this walk drills
Yeah.
got
Right.
done. The parking rides right behind when there's a railroad diner. People do use that walking trail gets used heavily.
I know we do, because we're coming right down Plummer, down Ann, and then headed that way, so it is a common walking area.
Popping the signs in by where Claire Drive is and intersects with it. What about putting two? It wouldn't be a three-way, it'd be two on either end. Is that like that? And it seems like a natural halfway point to me, but maybe I'm wrong then.
Ann Street kind of like the halfway.
Yeah,
It is?
Main Street's
Okay.
it goes up to the water department.
And there is a business on that road.
Okay.
There's traffic that comes and goes from the business.
Yeah. I just thought Ann Street would be where it's a regular road, it would be, and it's a through road, it would be the best place to put it. And we won't
You're
have-
saying a three-way stop at Ann Street and a stop ahead somewhere around the water,
Yeah, you
pump
have a
station.
stop ahead up by the water, let's say where the pumping station is for the sewer, and
Yeah.
then down, let's say somewhere when you come around the corner where Green Street is there, maybe you could have a stop ahead sign there that would tell,
What I would recommend on that is that we'll look at the METCD manual and find out how far the stop head sign needs to be from the actual
okay,
stop sign.
yeah,
There.
well, I'm just giving rough estimates here.
Yep.
And then do you have any complaints on Free Street?
I didn't go through that before coming here. I didn't know about Free Street. Have we
Uh,
gotten some on Free Street
yeah.
before? Yes, we have. I mean, a lot. I'd say it's probably similar to Dave Street, but I can't give you. I would just be guessing.
Yeah, I think it's something.
you had the three most common, is Davis on that list.
Excuse me.
What are the ones you get the most complaints from?
Speeding complaints.
Yep.
Some.
I get speeding complaints on every street in town.
Yeah.
No one singled out.
No.
There's speeding complaints that come in, and the one day shift officers in the falls in Lisbon, they go to Lisbon. Even just recently in Grandview, which is a small street, there was visitors, people visiting a house. I mean,
So there's no one area.
there's we get a lot on School Street too. School Street, there's the community center there. A lot of people come and go. There's a lot of traffic that comes through town. So I can't say that there's one street that gets more than others.
But you never get one on Lake Road. So, at least on Davis Street, are we, having an agreement to study the situation, or
I'm,
go forward with it?
I'm not in disagreement, because in that regard, you could look at pushing that out in future places. So and it's a lot less invasive than the speed bumps.
I don't think it's a bad idea considering that the walking path traffic's only gonna
Yeah.
become increase, not decrease. So not a bad idea to build a plan in to slow the folks going through there at a high rate of speed now and start to let them know that this is gonna be the norm going forward. No pun intended.
Just reminders on like the orange flags on the side of the speed limit sign. Just
I like that. The one that stands out in my mind, because I'm down there all the time, is the one going downhill in Thompson. After you go past before you turn into Thompson Fair, there's a speed limit sign that's flashing all
Oh,
the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that, quick
Yeah,
shot.
those are the ones I'm looking for the grant. I'm sure those aren't inexpensive.
Those probably aren't cheap.
The one in
Yeah.
Bowden with the cannon.
Yeah, no, I know exactly which one he's talking about. I think this, well, they have some at the crosswalk there, don't they, too, for it's in Portland.
I don't know, that's the one that
Yeah.
I'm going down that area all the
Yeah,
time, so.
that one
it's,
definitely.
Thompson's also got those flashing lights on 196 by Crookers and the strobes and the red
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get those from McDonald's because sometimes it's really hard seeing that set of lights. I was told by DOT they can't do those anymore because of people that can have seizures and whatnot.
Yeah,
so,
they have epilepsy.
I wasn't able to do that. So.
so
Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
That it?
You got one more thing before Ryan
Oh.
leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have one more thing to do.
Not on my agenda.
No, it's
Thank
not
you.
on your agenda.
Now we're throwing it at you.
We, 196 committee
Thank you, sir.
has asked the council to make them an
Thank you, Dan.
official committee. And we would like to have a meeting the 28th of this month. And they have asked, well, I'm gonna be there, cause eventually I'm gonna try to be on the committee. I imagine you're gonna be there. Town
Diane,
manager. Guess who else they want there?
5:30. 5:30?
5:30.
5:30.
Whatever it is,
Oh,
okay? But they,
So it looks,
and what they wanna do is basically start an official committee, with, notes being taken and all of that stuff. And, I'm gonna say something, how would you wanna, probably like the planning board or whatever, along that same line?
I mean, the biggest thing is just to, if I may, one of the things that's happened in this town over a number of last 10 to 15 years I've been involved is that we actually start with a lot of groups and committees, and typically what they do is they start as a big group, very active, and over the course of a year, they dwindle down to the point where they just fade away, and it happened with a lot of study groups and downtown groups and visionary groups and groups that we've done, because the downfall is the group will stay active as long as there's something happening, and as soon as something just kind of gets stale, it actually fades away. The 196 group originally was actually established more as a citizens group to actually look at the 196 master plan and try to figure out how to bring some of it to bring it forward. Because the 196 master plan took about 2 years to actually develop, and there really wasn't any, how would I say it? There was no mechanism put in place when the study was done to actually move that plan forward. And with the town employees being pretty much, understaffed and overworked, and the planning board, it's really hard unless there is a citizens initiative to actually move it forward. When we did that, it actually was just that. It was a citizen group to look at it and try to move it forward. Since then, it's actually reached out to a lot. It's just not the 196 group. It's actually, we're looking at facade grants. We're looking at, basically touching base on helping with the economic, forward movement of the town also. What we'd like to do is actually, since it actually just started out that way and it's really kind of not fizzled away, we probably started off 25, 30 people. We're down to about a group of 4 that meet now. And it's really hard to pull people into, to serve time on the committee when it's not really an official committee. They ask you what you do or what your responsibilities are, and you say, well, I don't know, what do you want me to tell you, to come in. What we'd like to do is establish this, the 196 focus is gonna be long-term. I mean, it's something that's not going away, along with a lot of the plans that we have, the long-term thinking plans. So the idea of establishing a committee that actually has, an X number, whether it's 5 or 7, that actually has, a council support, that actually has, keeps minutes, so you can look back a year ago and see what we actually talked about. and actually give a definite mission of what their focus is. I think it'd be a lot better idea. I know a lot of business owners in town would like to be part of the group, but unfortunately, they wanna know what their end goal is. If I serve in this committee for a year, what are we looking to if we achieve something? And it's really hard to do that without an official committee. With that, we'd like to be able to have some direct contact. And we'll go back to just, and Ryan knows a little bit about this, and Roger does, he was at the meeting that night. We'll talk about a little bit about the Davis Street, sidewalk. We actually our group looked at that for almost 2 years, actually just looking at different ways we can look at it and benefit it. And the main thing was twofold, was the idea to make a safe sidewalk to connect the parking ride to the parking lot to the trail, but also connect people from that, the 20 or 30 or 40,000 that Noyes and Lawrence says walks the trail every year, to connect them to our downtown, because that's the key. It's one of the reasons you actually see a walk-up window on Roma Joe's is because, in the Stellan factory trying to move to town, we say, you put a walk-up window, we'll get people there, and we've never really achieved that yet. There's people that walk there, but when you get to the end of Davis Street, number one, you get to the end of the trail, you really don't know where you're going from there, there's no signage. You're walking down Davis Street, you're really questioning where you're going at that point, and when you get to the end of 196, to cross 196 is something I wouldn't take my family on a busy day at 3:30 in the afternoon and cross 196 there to go to Roma Joe's, but maybe slightly dangerous, So we looked at that whole area, we actually reached out as council and tried to get a big grant to redo a lot of that area. Of course, as we know, state money kind of fades away at times. So what we're looking to do right now is actually come forward to the council there was some money put aside for Davis Street's sidewalk, but there was also $50,000 that was put aside as a match for that grant. If we're not gonna get that grant, we would like to actually come forward to the council and saying, we can take that $50,000 and let us do this to the end of this road and make a safe crosswalk and actually help Public Works actually continue the sidewalk down. They've already continued it, started the plan. The hardest thing, I know, as Ryan can contest to, I believe, is the idea of Public Works actually is, I don't know if they could actually just do a lot of the manholes and all the stuff they're doing in road work, that they have enough time to do everything they need to do even in the course of the summer. We're already through the middle end of July. It's coming quick.
Yeah.
So we would like to do, I felt if we were a little bit more of an official group, we'd actually probably have a little bit more of a direction, a little bit more when we approach council as a little bit more official. As we move forward in our next meeting, that's why I'm hoping to have Ryan there, is we're gonna look at the sidewalk that he started and actually look at the intersection that's been somewhat engineered because it's part of the process we already put in, and see where that money would actually bring us. I would like to bring a proposal forward that actually got Public Works off the hook for doing that intersection, and actually maybe use that $50,000 to go out for bid to actually see if we can actually get the intersection done. Because that intersection done the way that was engineered, isn't this a 2 or 3 day job? I mean, that's pretty involved, from me looking at it anyways, to do it right. We're looking to actually have, and it kind of goes in the signage thing, I mean, we want to use some of that money for signage, and part of that could be stop signs, could be warning signs, it could be directional signs. That $50,000, I speak about it as a lot of money, but, as any project goes, that $50,000 could get dwindled down pretty quickly. That's not even talking about the other part of it, so, I think it'd be important for Ryan to be part of that discussion in the sense where he's already started the project down Davis Street. Is it more feasible to get someone in to actually, give us a quote on doing the intersection, paving that after you get it ready? So it's actually done in one process if we have the funds to do it, or not, how much a Public Works can do. But again, going back, that's one of the goals that we would have, is the idea to make that more of an official committee where if someone was willing to join onto it, they would know what their recommend, you meet once a month at such a date, from what time to what time, these are our goals and this is what your obligations are, and it's really hard to recruit new people into a group that actually is, that there really isn't no firm direction on. How's that?
I wanna add to it. I know you are busy and you have kids at home and all of that. I know that, but with it starting at 5:30, I figured you could, if you could give us a half an hour, or if you couldn't, then you could have the stuff that the committee wanted and give it to Diane, so she could come.
No, we'll work it out.
You
It's
know,
no big deal.
I'm sure, I figured, just everybody has to get together to talk about it, and then it should get worked out. And, basically, I know what Fern wants, is just, and the committee has, and I probably will, in January, join the committee. So, I'm still gonna be around. So, but, you know, it's information.
Hmm?
That's basically what
problem.
it is, information.
Good day.
Slacking, he's taking a whole, you're coming back in January, you said?
Oh, yeah, to be on his
Yeah,
committee.
yeah, no, I get.
You took 2 weeks off, what the
Oh,
hell?
Slacking.
Question,
Yeah.
on the topic of committees, is it unheard of that to actually do a presentation to council, or at least what we can do? I mean, for instance, I know what the workings of the recreation committee is, and the ones that we're associated with, but do the committees actually have any communication between each other? To know that they can either assist, they're actually working on the same goals, or duplicating
I think-
efforts?
I think the committee,
Is there any of that kind of oversight?
yeah, cause, well, I don't know how much it is, but the other, cause we have liaisons, like you're the,
Yeah, no, I get that, and that's,
Right. but you,
it's only as active as the liaison and what actually comes
Yeah.
together, but the point that I'm making is, where does all this information come together to be able to say? The reason being is, I remember the last council meeting, and the fact is having the discussion when the rec department and the school department are comparing the same thing. They both want a river access trail commission, and neither of them have any idea what the other party's doing.
because one's not talking to the other.
You know, and
Yeah.
that's two
You're-
departments.
You're exactly right, it was brought up by you, same
And
thing.
it's, and I know, and it's because he brought that up in that regard, after the meeting, is the fact is that was one of the original pitches to actually put that river trail together. And the fact is, we ought to at least be communicating amongst these various, not, if not departments, committees.
It would be like.
How
the
can we
fac-
actually
it would be like
assist you?
the facilities committee on the
Yeah,
school department, and
Yeah.
that would be almost the committee, I don't know what committee would talk to, but, like if your committee, they could talk to that, and they could be, because it's with the trails and.
Well,
you
the
know.
chairs of these committees could get together and talk amongst each other, just to kind of say, here's how we're driving the ball forward. That way, if there's a common goal to be achieved, and you got folks who are trying, you don't have two
Yeah.
different folks pushing a different rock up the same hill.
Right.
You know?
more
You
so,
know?
the other part of that too is how can you get on my radar? So the fact is, I know what we can do as the council to help you. So the fact is, what are your priorities?
Yeah, that's why, like on
Yeah.
Friends Committee, that
And then I get-
we wanna
Which is why he
liaison.
wants,
Right,
exactly,
Right,
yeah.
so they,
It's only as active as the people, and
You know,
we see it
I'm-
every day. We drive by the marquee. The fact is, every committee's got a list out there for volunteers.
Right.
They're not coming out of the woodwork, so they
No,
can't
they're
tell you
not.
that there's not always the best of capability to be able to do what they would like to be able to do either.
Right. well, I know, it's, the volunteers are hard to
Come by.
come by.
So I didn't know if there was
Typically, when you
unheard
have
of.
these committees surrounding the town, not so much on the school, but the town side, you usually do have a liaison. One member of the council sits on that committee, and I don't think that's happening. At least I don't,
I'm on the water department. and I'm
right,
on
but like
and
on the
I'm planning
recreation
board.
committee?
We saw the
There's
list. There's
the
one.
recreation,
There's one assigned
cemetery.
each, but
Right.
the fact is, one of what are
Yeah,
they
nobody's
working
on
on?
the cemetery.
How does I get back to the council to communication?
Yeah.
That's what I think is
Oh,
probably
we haven't met
the
either.
disconnect.
Right,
In the other ways, use that example with the school and the rec. They're working on the same thing, and neither
Yeah.
party had any idea what the other was doing. Just how ludicrous is this? You know,
Well, maybe each committee needs to do a yearly meeting and present to Diane what it is that their objective is that
for the
year.
Yeah, something of that
I
nature.
think that one trail, I think that caught the attention of the town council. More town councilmen on that one, what, you know,
Yeah, I know. You can see the whole meeting took a left turn when their dialogue between Mark and I. So,
you know,
what the heck is he talking about?
they wanna put a trail, you wanna put a trail, what's going on here, you know?
Right. And at the end game, the only reason that I actually brought it up at all is I happened to have access to the scout.
Right,
We can get resources from outside to actually have it done for free to
Right.
benefit the community by just tying it to a kid through the Eagle Scout program.
Right.
You know, so free labor. It's there. It's just you have to make it obtainable for the person. And it was an idea that floated
no,
around.
we've gotta follow up on it.
Okay,
That's
that's good. I would like to see that on.
So we're gonna have that meeting on 28th, and then what I would like to do is, after that meeting, we get things squared around, that I would like to come to council and make the one 96 committee, an official town committee.
An ordinance change, I believe, at that one time.
We'll look it up and see.
Yeah, or whatever it's gotta be done.
They have reserved the right to establish committees without having to have an ordinance change. I think
Yeah.
council reserves that
Yeah.
right, but I'll double check it.
Nope, I got no issue with that whatsoever.
I didn't think it.
Cause it's all tied to
It's all
land
tied.
use, it's all tied to the planning,
Yeah.
it's,
And I know all about committees and how they fizzle out.
yeah.
This will work, and it's a good start.
No, I agree. Thank you.
Next item, Twyla.
To adjourn. I'll make that motion.
Oh.
I'm freezing.
How long you got a second?
Yeah, you got it.
Sorry, I'll leave those up there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That, then the road thing is like,
I almost sat down.